So, what is spiritualism or Espiritismo? In the book I talk about Allan Kardec. And Allan Kardec is the person who is celebrated as having the codification of spiritualism in the modern world. Okay. Spiritualism existed before Allan Kardec. It existed in places in West Africa. It existed in the pre-slavery of the Congo. We have to remember that the Congolese were exposed to Christianity in the 1400s. And the Mani Congo, the king Nzinga, converted to Christianity. He used to take mass. So later on, the Congos co-opted certain symbols that were close to their own philosophy and incorporated them in their shrines. And so we see the first examples of Espiritismo when you see foreign icons congregating in one altar. So spiritualism, as Allan Kardec codified it, had to do with the idea that the church was just not enough, that there were these phenomena and the dead were coming back and contacting people. And Allan Kardec started out as a skeptic and soon became very fanatical and immersed in the phenomena of spiritualism. So spiritualism is the ability to tap into spirit and ancestry without the confines of initiation, so that there is no actual system. There is a general there are these general bylaws in spiritualism. So spiritualism, as it was given to African Americans by way of Cuban, is the system of honoring our celestial court. This deals with the spirits that are not deities, they are not forces, they are just consciousnesses that have been sent with us on this journey that we call our life. I like to explain that when we are born, our flesh is soft and malleable. And so when you are an embryo in your mother's womb, you are affected by vibration. And so when we talk about astrology is the idea that certain planets are aligning and certain stars are allowed to penetrate directly to our planet and send a magnetic or electromagnetic force that will somehow create a pattern within our DNA. And so these patterns dictate our makeup, our personality makeup, our health makeup, our ambitious makeup, our compassionate makeup. And these spirits are consciousnesses that are attached to us, like something similar to a parasite. Now, some parasites are actually beneficial to the host. They protect the host. So they are there. It is a symbiotic relationship where the parasite receives something and the host receives something from the parasite. This is similar to our connection to spirits, or what we call muertos. And some of these spirits may not have even lived a life in this reality, but they are consciousnesses that are available to us to change the lens of how we perceive things. So spiritualism is the ability to have all religious thought congregate at one table and it be categorized and collated so that it serves us. So in spiritualism, there is no actual religion, just the idea of religious philosophy, so that we adapt all philosophies that are benevolent and are focused on our elevation as sentient beings. The idea of spiritualism is that when the Africans came to the New World and were exposed to different cultures and customs, many of these customs, the Africans acknowledged the value in them. And so over generations, some of these Africans may have pledged allegiance to certain philosophies, which allowed them a different perspective. So within our hereditary bloodlines, we have characters in our history who may have renounced, or not even renounced, may have embraced the foreign concepts, and from that had a particular consciousness and perspective on life. These spirits, somewhat like parasites, attach themselves to our spiritual makeup when we are born. Some of these parasites are benevolent and others are malevolent. It is the expertise of the mystics around to determine which parasites are parasitic and which ones are symbiotic. And so in spiritualism we have the altar, and the altar is the concept of self-preservation, so that one steps out of oneself and examines oneself in the icon. So the first sacrifice that one will embark on is the sacrifice of time and space. So that I have this altar here, and this altar behind me took time for me to erect it, and it occupied space for me to erect it. Time and space are two forces that we do not have control of, but we can give freely. It does not cost anything tangible to give your time. It does not cost anything tangible to give space. Now, we don't control these two forces, but we give them freely. So the first concept of sacrifice is the idea that this room, I sacrifice the space to use this space for other endeavors, but I dedicated it to the spiritual. That's the first sacrifice. Then the sacrifice of time that it took me to erect it, and as well as maintain, and to give attention, whether be it meditation, ritual, these things I give them freely. So the altar becomes a way for us to have a certain discipline for ourselves, so that if I erect an altar, I am now responsible to have upkeep of the altar. In upkeeping the altar, I am taking out time for myself, time that is not allotted to my parents, to my children, to my friends, to my career, purely to that which I cannot see. So I allot this time to meditate or interface with said altar. In doing so, if I see myself neglecting it, I can see that I'm neglecting myself. So I set up my glasses, and I'm disciplined enough to change the water in the glasses. And if I find that my life, my career, my children, my parents, my friends are distracting me from that, I realize that I am not taking time for myself. And so I will recognize that the glasses will begin, the water will begin to recede. The glasses are now a little dirty. They've been picking up particles of dust and that's been in the air. And so I realize that I am not taking care of myself. And so the altar provides us with a detachment of ourselves, to come out of ourselves, to examine ourselves. I also like to believe that in the spiritual realm, the spirits and the ancestors have an altar set up for me, so that they are praying for me just as I am praying for them. In order to understand this concept, one must accept the idea that time and space are circular and not linear. And so what I do for my ancestors today affects them in the past, which will effectively change my future. So if my ancestors were on a plantation and they needed water and they were parched, I provide that water on my altar for them. That water sustains them so that they don't get whipped, they don't fall short of their quota. That glass of water and that prayer may even allow them to find a way to escape, so that may change my future, so that I give them something that resonates to the past, and that changes the past, that now changes my present as well as my future. It's very similar to what they talk about in Back to the Future. When you go back and you change one thing, everything in the forward moving has changed as well. So the altar, I like to believe that the altar, they have an altar for us. And on this altar, we provide them with the commodities that are necessary for them to function in the spirit world. There's a movie that Disney has done called Coco, which talks about the Mexican custom of the day, Dia de Muertos, May 5th, where Mexican people go to the grave and they bring offerings to their dead family members, and this allows the dead family members to interface and interact with them in this reality. So in Coco, the spirits were not settled because there was no one praying for him. There was no one putting a candle out and lighting a candle or putting a photo up for him. His photo was disposed. So I like to believe that in having this altar erected, I am able to give my spiritual court or my spiritual assistants water, with the glass of water, a candle for fire, some flowers or some incense for this element of earth, and prayer and mantras in the element of wind, so that the sound that they hear me. And so I give them these four elements to give them a reference to the reality in which that I am trapped in, which is water, fire, earth, and air. And in those four elements, that is my reality. And so I give them these examples for them to now interface with me via one of these conduits, albeit I see them, I hear them, I smell them, or I dream them. Now, in the book, you hear me talk about dreams are associated with water and our sense of taste. And to make it plain, when you sleep, you swallow, even in your sleep. So this is incorporated, you are swallowing in your dream, so that you taste things in your dream. Our sense of smell is the strongest sense that we have to memory. If you smell something, you can be directly drawn or placed into a specific time and space. Whereas you can look and try to see and try to recollect through your eyes, through the eyes of your mind, or hear it through the ears of your mind, but your sense of smell will take you immediately there, because it is the strongest sense that we actually neglect. It is the one that we are most subconscious about. Now I give them these 4 elements, these things on the altar, to give them a reference to my reality. And in return for me giving them these commodities, they provide protection, health, luck, and opportunity. And luck is a real thing. Luck is something that you have to be there at the right place at the right time, right? That is all orchestrated by our spiritual court. Whether or not you're rushing to get to something, or we'll wait, we'll take our time. This determines whether or not you get a hold of your luck. And so we interface with our altar to give them an example of what we need in this world. And so the more that I am disciplined in terms of changing the glasses and cleaning my altar and maintaining it, I acknowledge that my opportunities and my luck begin to change. So it is necessary for people to have an altar. It doesn't have to be big or grandiose. You start off with 1 glass of water and a candle, and that first glass should be dedicated to the most profound person that you know that has passed on, albeit a parent, a friend, a family member. You start with those, and these build up your spiritual foundation in terms of being a newly awakened participant to the spiritual world. When working with your spirits, it requires the community again. So we have what the modern world would call a seance, but we call it a misa, a mass, a spiritual mass, right? Because in mass in Catholic Church they're calling out the dead. So we have a spiritual mass, and in this spiritual mass we are acknowledging as many names as we can recall, to give them light and peace and prosperity. When dealing with our spiritual court, it is integral that we have other spiritualists around to give us some sort of example of how, or if our imagination is real or not. So you may have an image of a being that you feel is with you, and when you go to the misa and you interface with another spiritualist who doesn't know what's going on in your head, and this person describes what you see in your head, then this gives you evidence, this gives you confirmation that your imagination is not just your imagination. It is attached to your spiritual sight. It is attached to your spiritual intuition. And so, in dealing with our spirits, it's important that we first honor our ancestral line first, those who came before us, who made it possible for us to have this existence. And then we, through time, we learn who is walking with us. It's like the famous quote talks about footprints, where it says, "God, you abandoned me, and look, there's only one set of footprints." And then God says, "No, I was carrying all this time." Sometimes you don't know who was carrying you, and so it takes an outside eye to see it and to describe these sentient beings who are there with you to walk you through this journey. And so in the Misa, the channeler or the medium will describe what they see around you.